Okay, I'm your host, Cool Al, and I'm here with my wonderful co host, Maria. And today we're going to discuss a topic that has been long overdue. Because I think that anybody who really knows me knows that I'm a dedicated Star Wars fan. I mean, they also know I'm a Michael Jackson fan, and I think Michael likes Star Wars as well. But anyway, you know, the people in my film circle or whatever, they know that that's one of my favorite movies of all time. So, with no further ado, we're going to jump right into Star Wars. And I think this is a good juxtaposition because I'm a big fan of the movies, so I feel that Star Wars basically can do no wrong. Her, not so much. So, to bounce ideas off a fanboy and a not so fanboy, this should be interesting. So, um, I'm gonna pose the question, being the aficionado slash expert slash all the wonderful things I can say, and ask this question of you. So, after watching Star Wars, the one that was released in '77, the original one, the fourth chapter, what I want to know some of the good things that you noticed, and then we'll go into the bad things. But let's start with some of the good things that you noticed after viewing this movie, if any.
You can't be more specific. I mean, I'm not a fan
Nope.
of the movie. I'm not a fan of the movie in
I
general.
can't be more specific, but
Yeah.
I think that sometimes we discuss something and you can talk about things you liked
Okay.
and things that you didn't like. So
Right,
can
okay.
you leave it like that? And
Sure,
okay.
I'll try. It's not my genre of movie, so I don't connect to it really.
I've already said that.
You've already said that.
Yes.
So good things, I don't know. I don't know. It's hard. It's difficult for me because I don't really connect to it at all. I feel like if there are deeper messages in the film, I could probably relate to that. But I feel like on the face of it, I don't see the deeper meanings
Right.
as
Okay.
much.
That's
So maybe
fine.
we can start
So
there.
let's say
because,
if someone came to you and asked you if they should see Star Wars, what would you tell them, and why?
Right. I would say, unless you're a fan of spaceships fighting and things like that you probably won't like it. So, I mean, I wouldn't recommend the movie, but again, it's like one of the most famous popular movies ever. So I feel like I'm missing something, probably. So I'm missing something.
Right. So there's
very
nothing
profound,
redeemable in the whole 2 hours we watched the film. There's nothing that stood out. There's nothing that you would that you found that you could expound upon. Not one good thing.
I don't know. The robots are kind of cute. I mean, they've always been R2D2 and C3PO are kind of interesting in a way, but I don't really. Yeah, I don't know. I'm having a hard time because I found myself forcing myself to look at the movie, to watch the movie. So
okay. Was there anything that stood out about Luke? Was there anything that stood out about Leia? Was there anything that stood out about Han Solo? Was there anything that stood out about Obi-Wan Kenobi, Darth Vader?
No, I mean, Luke, I guess he wanted to do more exciting things and to be a farm boy or whatever it is that I think he wanted to, have a more exciting life
than just a farm boy.
Yeah.
Right. He wanted to be a pilot like his father before him.
Yeah. So that's I
right.
thought that was.
Did you feel any sympathy for someone who lost? Like, they didn't really go into great detail. But this young boy was raised by his aunt and uncle, so obviously his parents weren't involved. So did you feel any sympathy for this farm boy who was
Mhm.
growing up having to work so hard, knowing that his parents weren't present for whatever reason, and that his aunt and uncle had to
Mhm.
raise him, and in the course of the movie they get killed. Like, was there any?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. I find that science fiction type movies, I have very little emotional connection for whatever reason, even though if this were in a different setting, I probably would have had more emotion. But I didn't feel a lot of emotion in general because it just seems like such a foreign, movie. It's so out of. It just seems like a fighting type of movie. So yeah, I guess if you think about it, yeah. But when I was watching the movie, no, I didn't really have any emotional reaction about his
Okay.
parents because there's no flashbacks. Maybe if there had been, I don't. When were his parents? I don't know when his parents were killed, but I don't know if there was
Okay.
if there would have been any.
So right now,
So
what you represent to me is like
is
the dark side of the force,
probably.
because with your hatred of such a great movie,
Mhm.
like it's just hard for me to sit and
I
listen.
know. I
So
know.
can you do me a favor
Yeah.
and try to ask me 3 questions, because like
Okay,
I'm trying
okay.
to ask questions to
Right.
you and I'm getting absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So can
Okay.
you do me a favor and just try to extrapolate 3 questions
Mhm.
that I can try to answer for.
Okay. So in the movie, and I feel like I missed this somehow. I know Luke's parents aren't alive anymore. When did they die? And was that presented in the movie somehow? I feel like I missed that whole thing.
Well, Obi-Wan Kenobi, there wasn't much talk about his mother at
Okay,
all,
right.
at all, if any.
Mm-hmm.
But supposedly his father went off and became some kind of pilot. And so
Okay.
Obi-Wan Kenobi claimed to have known the boy's dad. And
Okay.
the uncle called like Obi-Wan some crazy old wizard, and I think that a lot of Star Wars fanatics who believe in the Force or believe in the magic of Star Wars are all looked at as some crazy old fanboys slash wizards, nerds, geeks. So this is how Obi-Wan was dismissed, and people like you dismiss the genre or the fans of that genre. But back to the question,
Okay.
Obi-Wan claimed to have been friends with Luke's father, who
Okay.
the uncle had referenced. He wanted to go off and be a pilot, and he alluded to something, I guess going tragically wrong with Luke's dad. And Obi-Wan even referenced, like, he was telling Luke that Darth Vader was the person who killed Luke's father.
Okay.
That's what Obi-Wan was telling Luke.
Okay.
So any more questions?
Well, Princess Leia, like, what's her story exactly? I don't know her backstory or.
Well, they built her up as a person who was part of a rebellion against the Empire. The Empire is Darth Vader and the people he's associated with, and their space station, the Death Star, that destroys planets or that has the power to destroy planets. And so they presented this evil empire. There wasn't much background information, but they were pretty evil. And then there was Princess Leia, who represented another group of people that represented like the rebellion.
Okay.
And so somehow she had been captured, and she sent information to Obi-Wan through the droids. Somehow the droids got to Obi-Wan. He was able to retrieve the information. The droid also had secret information about the Death Star and how it was built, and so how it could be destroyed, and And so she was taken hostage by the Empire, and somehow Luke, Obi-Wan, the droids, Han Solo, all were brought together as some kind of motley crew, and by happenstance or by the will of the Force or by luck, they came into contact with the princess and rescued her and saved the day.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's a kind of a classic story. Well, except for the fact that she's
Yes, it is a classic story. Amen.
So I mean, sometimes I need it explained to me rather than watching the movie, because the movie, has such an element of the science fiction that I have a hard time having a human connection with. But when I can hear a summary of it, I actually like that better.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Right.
I almost probably would prefer to read a book about it rather than seeing the movie.
So there was a lot of science fiction in it.
Yeah.
There was also it had a lot of the elements of a Western. I mean, you look at how Han Solo was dressed, like how his belt, how his belt looked, how he had a vest. It looks like he's a space cowboy in a lot of ways. And I've never noticed that. Of the million times I've watched it, I've heard it compared to a Western because they have the big showdown, except,
right.
Even though Han Solo has his blaster, the Jedi's weapon of choice is the lightsaber. And, but it really is like a space Western where, the bad guy and the good guy, they meet up at sundown and have a classic duel and stuff. But it was it's so much more than that. It's like there's religious themes that are all throughout the movie. There's a certain amount of mythology involved. If you've ever read any Greek or Roman myths, like it's a lot of that in there. It's a lot of that. So you have the Western, you have the science fiction, you have Greek mythology. A lot of people said that there was this book called A Hero's Journey, and where, the hero can represent any man kind of character, kind of like, when you read the Iliad or the Odyssey, there's this one guy, who somehow is put in a predicament to do all these heroic things, and he could be anybody, like any comic book character that has things happen to him, events that make him into a bigger hero. So there's so many things that's built into this story and interwoven, and that's why it connects with so many around the world the way it does. And then there's the people who just totally miss it. It just
and I think that's kind of me, is that I can't appreciate it if I'm being told, but it does go over my head, because I think it's because the way it's presented, because it's just that kind of film that I don't generally watch, where there's a lot of fighting and there's a lot of I have a hard time connecting. It's
action, adventure, there's romance, there's
but not much romance,
student,
really.
The mentor, there's the climbing out of poverty, having aspirations, like young kids trying to learn right from wrong, and do they go into the military or off to college, and and then who do they become afterwards? Do they use their tools that they've been given for good or bad? Like all of this is interwoven in this movie, and it's dynamics, family dynamics, like the orphan kid who has to find meaning in his way in life.
And I'm sure I'm the minority that doesn't connect to this movie. It's wildly popular, so I know my own kids loved it. I saw many lightsaber battles between with my kids, when they were young. I mean, they loved it. So, it's a very universally appealing movie, I think.
Right.
So, so I know it's obviously, I'm probably a little bit of the minority when I say, I didn't connect with it or get it.
Right.
But then again, a lot of it's, if you try to get it, you will, or if you try to make more effort to try to understand the themes, then They
So
are there, but
we already
so,
attempted
yeah.
to get your exposition. What I need
Okay.
from you to do is try to extrapolate questions so that
Okay.
I can speak to this, because
So
I don't want this whole video to be about Star Wars and how I didn't get
Okay.
it because I couldn't
Right.
figure out, and I don't know why people like it, even though some do.
Mhm.
So I want to try to give some information.
Okay.
So if
third
you
question,
can ask me questions where I can address,
Okay.
you know, what was going on in the movie, that would
Right.
help us
Okay.
all. May the force be with you.
Yeah. Okay. Let me try to come up with a third question. So, I guess R2D2 and C3PO. Are they droids? What are they
Yes,
exactly?
they
They're
are.
droids.
They
They're
are
robots.
androids, and
Yeah.
there wasn't much of a backstory presented. Like, I think in future films, well, I know because I've seen them all. You know, their backstory will be revealed.
Okay.
But
So,
I
mean, they're fun characters for sure.
right.
You know.
How do you know, they were very different. Like, what were some differences that you noticed in them?
Well, you pointed out, I don't know that yet, that R2D2 is kind of saves the day. He kind of figures things out a little bit, whereas C3PO is more is a thinker, but doesn't really necessarily solve the problem or something. Maybe he's too afraid, or he's too yeah, I don't know.
C3PO is very, very intelligent, can speak multiple languages, and can communicate very well. However, he's afraid of his own shadow for the most part. You know, R2D2 doesn't really speak well. He communicates, but in his own little droid speak language. But has the biggest balls you ever gonna find on a robot, if I can say that. He's so brave and fearless, and you know, time and time again throughout the Star Wars chapters, like, he does things that fix whatever problems arise for the most part. You know, there's Luke who does his own heroics, but R2D2 on the technical side is always figuring out this and that. You know, I think that C3PO has the book knowledge, but R2D2 has the practical, you know, he does the practical things that save the day time and time again.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't want to make this very long, and you know, I wish there was more of a, you know, pros and cons debate, and I guess we represented that, but you know, even if you could probably speak in more detail as to why you didn't like it or why it didn't connect, like, that might help.
Right.
Because I think that I've given a nice counterbalance to the pros of the film. Yeah. So if you could try to answer that last question, like,
why didn't it connect?
Or what all the things that you didn't like.
Well, I don't connect. The genre makes it hard for me to connect, even though there's all those themes like good and bad and you're good or evil. It's just because it's this star-based kind of universe kind of thing. I just find myself not tuned into it, if that makes any sense. Like, I just don't find myself engaged. I feel like my mind is wandering. I'm looking away. Like, if there's any kind of a battle, and this is true of sort of probably any kind of karate movie or any sort of Western where they're shooting, I tend to kind of drift off when there's fighting involved, or like when there's the spaceships are flying around, and I find that any kind of genre like that, my mind wanders, and then I've missed things that could be very good, because those kinds of action-based films, I find I tend to lose interest in that, and so I might miss the good conversations that are happening. Whereas, so I just tend to like more realistic type of movies. Right. So I think that's, for me, the problem is that my mind will just wander in a part that I find is boring. So and then I'm finding, oh, what happened? So it's a lot of just not interest, not finding little to connect with battles, battle scenes or those sorts of things, or just people wearing different kind of clothing. It just feels hard for me as a human to connect human qualities when the people are so far-fetched and they're, does that make sense? Like I just as a person just find it hard to connect, always have, with anything that doesn't feel like it's in our world. I have a hard time relating it. And
well, what I find so fascinating about it is that the movie was made and it came from the imagination of George Lucas and the people who helped him work on this project. But it wasn't set in our time. It was, set into the future, where, they talked about like space and space travel and spaceships and robots and stuff. And, it wasn't just your ordinary walk into the cinema, this is what's going on in my world. It took you to a galaxy far, far away. So the imagination that it took to do that, to me is amazing. Like it just wasn't your run of the mill, there's a phone booth, there's a, there weren't things from our world. They had creatures that, were presented in this movie. These, I guess, aliens or whatever, and humans and robots. And so to think that someone was thinking this far ahead way back in the 70s, as bland as a lot of the 70s were like as bland as it was in the 70s, to have that kind of forward thinking and to project it to, I think that George Lucas is an amazing visionary and artist, and some people get that.
Yeah.
Other people totally don't. And a good story is a good story, no matter if it's written like, I even watch movies that deal with the past, and there's good movies that have great stories that deal with the present. And that one is a, story that deals with the future. And a good story is a good story.
And I'm not trying to argue that it's a bad story in any way. I'm just saying it didn't connect with me. Maybe it was just when I saw it for the first time, being a little kid, I was sort of this Disney phase. I don't know. I was in a different stage. So for some reason I just can remember being so bored, like going to the theater. And I know it was this big deal, but I just remember thinking, I don't care about any of this. So I think I was probably at a different stage. If I had been a little bit older, maybe I would have had an easier time. So then I didn't like it. And therefore after that, nothing else Star Wars related was interesting to me. So
my goal was to present this in a way where Star Wars fans wouldn't wind up hating you. But I think that you speak to a small minority who really don't get it, and you'll be their hero. But like for the people that I'm gonna present this to and for, like,
they don't understand my perspective.
I didn't want you to look like Darth Vader, but you kind of sort of do, and you've chosen that. Now you have to deal with it.
Well, and it's okay, because I have a hard time connecting, but I'm learning it. I'm trying to understand the story and trying to have you teach it to me. Watching it isn't always enough, but because, like I said, my mind will wander. But I feel like it's important to know about it.
Yeah.
There's so many people that reference it. I feel like it should be something people know the story of.
Yeah, I think that anybody going into film, this will be one of the films that is studied thoroughly. If you want to be unique, if you want to bring a fresh idea, like, I look at it and I'm just amazed, like, because I've seen, that film, which, it kind of was rough, like the things that happened, you look and it's just like back in the days when we watched this first Superman on TV, like sometimes you could see the strings, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like with Star Wars, there are technical things that you can say, okay, I could see what they were trying to get at. and to the latest films and how far they've gone and with what they can do with with the camera and the technology that we have now, but like if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have got to where we are today. And I'm talking about with this particular franchise. It might even speak to just, technology and filmmaking in general, but for the franchise to start out like they did, and for that to catch on like wildfire and spread and grow and grow. And now all the money that's dumped into making these movies and all the money it generates from that single seed that we watched is just amazing. It's amazing. But I think that I'm gonna stick a fork in this turkey because I think it's done. I don't want her to trash it any further.
I'm not. I'm trying
because
not to.
it's almost blasphemous when I hear someone say something negative about Star Wars. So this was very hard for me. But, I do also like having both sides of something explored, or as many sides or as many perspectives, because I think that that's how people grow and learn. So hopefully this can be informative to you guys. On that note, peace, and we're out.